Uh, Hi, everyone. I'm delighted to welcome you to our Zoom, and it's a real honor. It's my very first time, Dr. Shlomi, to be on a Zoom with Dr. Shlomi Zimmerman. He's just an outstanding clinical psychologist, and he wrote a masterpiece of a book called From Boys to Men. I've been recommending it to anyone and everyone since it came out. And first of all, congratulations on the book, Dr. Shlomi. Congratulations on all your work, but specifically this book. Let's start from the beginning. What got you to write the book?
Well, first of all, thank you so much, Rabbi Horowitz, for having me on and for all that you do. I'm hoping to sell, a tenth of what yours has done. So the impact that you had on Klal Yisrael is off the charts. So thank you,
Thank you
Yashikar.
very much. Thank you.
So the truth is, Hashem works in mysterious ways. I didn't really set out to write this book. I've been dealing with struggling teenagers prior to being a professional 25 years ago, and since being a professional for many, many, many years, and seeing countless of them struggle, and particularly with sexuality, with shame, toxic shame around pornography, masturbation, feeling terrible about themselves, one of the hardest places where they really struggle, and obviously contributing to abuse and all sorts of other tragic things. Um, there was some materials out there, particularly in terms of for yeshivas to talk to Bachrim. I thought they were pretty good. Definitely didn't require another one out there start reinventing the wheel. But then I started to see materials coming out in terms of how to deal with Bachrim that were struggling, and I started to have a real problem with that. They ranged from one extreme to the other. Some of them were still using harshness, negativity. You got to really push on self-control. And some were getting very involved, Rabbeim making special learning sedarim or contests and count your successful days and count your failings and tell the Rebbe. And I felt that there was no clear guidance in terms of this. And Guard Your Eyes brought me some initial works on that I saw the inklings of it, and I started chipping away at it, and then I said, okay, we're going to start from scratch, working at it from top to bottom. And I tried to make this something that was relevant to every parent who has particularly a boy. They keep hocking me to do one for girls. There's a lot in here that you could apply to girls, but my specific expertise, obviously my gender and my specific expertise uh, was with boys. So that's really how it came to be.
That's great. I mean, it's definitely a bigger challenge to educate boys around this space, just to the particulars, and there's far less material. I told Dr. Shlomi before we got on that this book was doing a book like this was on my bucket list, on my to-do list over 20 years ago. And I'm so delighted that you did it, and it's so valuable. I think it's a real game changer in terms of how parents approach uh, talking to children about puberty, about their bodies, about all of it, and to give them a healthy attitude to it is perhaps the most important thing, to put it in a context, like you said, not to go one extreme or the other, but to find the ever elusive, what Shlomo HaMelech, the wisest of all men, says, the golden path of moderation. So let's just start. I mean, I'm primarily geared to parents who want to have conversations with their children. Let's start from the beginning and say, like, at what age should they begin talking to their children about their bodies and specifically about puberty?
So let's take it way back, and from your early work in terms of child abuse, we prevention, we know that the kids who had a sense of their body parts and the names of their body parts and what's going on with them, that was healthier. Was it the English name that did the trick? No, it was kids having a sense, my parents can communicate to me about this, I know what's going on, I have a boundary. And it's important to frame this as not when we start communicating. At what age do we start? It's critical parents realize you're communicating to your child from the day they're born, verbally and non-verbally. How do you interact with them? How do you interact with their bodies? Do you just schlep them? Do you ask consent? Do you hold them gently? Do they not? Do they have boundaries when, in terms of their siblings, seeing them, changing times, everything? The communication is from the earliest stages. one of the most controversial elements of my book that was hard for people is that I discuss talking to children about marital intimacy at the ages of 9 to 11. People say, why so early, so this? And the basic answer is, and you've been doing this for who knows how long, it'll click immediately for the parents who have, that the curiosity and exposure occur before puberty. So when is a kid likely to hear about a joke about sexuality, innuendo, some joke, some inappropriate thing, is way earlier before their bodies actually change. And my biggest goal is that children don't have to grapple with things alone, that they're prepared. Why should we wait until something didn't make sense, a friend told them, somebody else told them, and then we're going to do damage control, preemptively teach them. So that was one of the hardest pieces. And
I mean, by the way, I fully validate everything you're saying about this, because especially today with technology, especially today with technology, they're getting wrong information or some information or any information, and they don't need to go to a public library or grab inappropriate content to learn about things. It's as accessible as the closest phone.
But I want to jump in on this, and it's so important, especially with you wear the rabbinic hat, that this is not just a capitulation, nebuch, now that there's pornography, now that there's exposure. We start in some way, they put me on the defensive. This wasn't done, we're doing something new. And I tell people, I'm not much of a historian, but I don't know when we started to rely on the fact that kids cannot touch Chumash Rashi, that they can't translate the base, forget the hidden svarim, that we didn't teach them the basics. If I said the first part of my book would be completely irrelevant if you don't have to use it. Teach them Chumash Rashi. Forget anything. Forget the Mishnayos and the Gemaras that you teach. Right. If you would do that in a natural, healthy way, then they would have the education at the very early ages. So it's a strange thing, because what we get into is how exposed, my community's less exposed. And I'm happy to debate with people, but I sense in doing abuse prevention work, when I used to do statistics in the early days when I was working with Debbie Fox, I stopped doing it. Why? Because I would spend a half hour fighting with people. They apply to Brooklyn, to Queens, not, to Lakewood, yes, to Monsey, not, and we lose the sight. And so the similar thing happened with my book. I could debate anything, but what I ask people to do, and if you don't mind, I want to do this for your audience, is very simple exercise. Just close your eyes for a moment, everybody, and go back in your own history to the first time that you had any exposure to sexual type material, education, something, and just try to think and feel really what was happening for you. What was that like? And
before the internet.
So 20, 30, 40 years ago.
Right, of course. Right.
Thousands of people, no internet, no garnished, before even dial-up, pre-internet. Just what was it like the first time you heard these jokes, or you saw something, or you read something somewhere, or Chaz v'shalom, even worse? What was it like? What were the thoughts? What were the feelings? What was the sense of who you could process that information or that experience with? And then from there, and inevitably, the vast majority of people will say that happened well before puberty for them.
Right.
And then we just transition over, close your eyes to the first time you started to have feelings about your body's changing, some attractions, some thoughts, some fantasy, and what did you think about yourself? How did you feel about your body? How did you feel about the supports around you? How did you feel about HaKadosh Baruch Hu, your spirituality? And Rabbi Yanki, I had this chus now of doing this with thousands of people around the globe, from ages, from 22 till 75. And not one told me it was
I didn't have this.
I didn't have it, or that it was a pleasant, good time. I knew what was going on. I felt good in my body. I felt good about my Yiddishkeit. I felt good about my thoughts and feelings, or I even understood them. Right? So
can I validate, Doctor? Can I validate something you said?
Please.
Maybe I can give you a tool.
Yeah.
Feel free to quote me on this. I think it's brilliant that you put it on them to think about it themselves without any research or anything like this. And I do know people who knew absolutely nothing till they got the chassan classes or kala classes. I do know that, but they're outliers. That's not what you don't create programs for outliers. But I started teaching 41 years ago. I taught an 8th grade class, and my sense was that I should be teaching when Rashi talks about marriage or other things like that, about general sexual content, to make it, I said, look, you guys, I used to say, you guys are old enough. I think we can have a rational conversation about this. And then therefore, if somebody wants to say something, they'll be embarrassed. But I asked 2 colleagues of mine who are 5 years older than me, um, if I should do it or not. So the first one I asked was just an adorable, fantastic 6th grade Rebbe, again, pre-dial-up, as he said.
Right.
And I said, like, what do you do? So he said, I'll tell you the truth. The first time I got to some chumash with sexual content, I skipped it. And a boy raised his hand from the back of the room. He says, Rebbe, if there's something you don't know, we'll be glad to explain it to you. I promise you, it's a true story. So feel free to do that. That was really, I just blew my mind. I thought it was hysterical. I said, okay, made up my mind. I didn't bother calling the second one. And the other thing is, when people would say, I would often get this pushback, especially 25 years ago, we're talking about child safety and stuff. People would say krechts, like a moan, and say, oh, what's with this generation that we have to talk about this? So my polite response would be, isn't it good that we're doing this now? And if someone would really press me and I'd get my Irish up, I would say something like, yeah, remember the good old days when they abused kids and no one did anything about it? Like, so you kol hakavod to you. You're so spot on. You're so spot on.
Right, but even I want to just touch on even that nakuda you said about there were some outliers that made it through, and we have this nostalgia about that, like, wow, such a beautiful, and sometimes you'll even hear it. They'll call them chashiv bacher and or
Right.
reina bacher, a clean bacher.
Mhm.
And again, I'm not doing this to pick at people, because I think we need to fundamentally change how we view and address this. I came up with the line in Torah: ignorance is not innocence. Wow, this bacher has no idea what it means. Zachar nekeva. He has no idea what pruvu means. He has no idea what the parsha of kedoshim is about. What?
Right.
Holy harein. You'd say, no, you're an amar tzleraisa. So the knowledge, and this is crucial, the knowledge is not damaging. Fakert, the
Right.
Torah is holy. The knowledge about what this is the holiest kind of knowledge. All the highest connections to what Kedusha is, to our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, involve this imagery and these mashalim. So we're starting, and I think it's a very toxic place, and this goes way, way, way back. The Ramban already brought down criticisms of even Khalila to say the Rambam being influenced by Christianity and other things, that we have seeped in that this whole topic is dark, it's bad, and halavai we could get through it. That to me is one of the things we'd have to change the most. That we have a value system that what Judaism brought to the world wasn't so much monotheism, was that you uplift the body.
Right.
That we're here to serve. We're not the aesthetics, right? And this is the most potent way, right? The recognition of what a Jew is a bris on that organ, because that's where Hashem is saying you're the special people. So if we cracks and we say, oh, it is dar with pornography, we have no choice, that's going to seep into our education, and that's going to keep them feeling that toxic shame and negativity. If we say this is beautiful, kaddish, and you're battling with it, it's because you're a hero, I think we're going to change the landscape.
Right. And then, one of the things that when I first started studying the space of child abuse prevention and all of that, so there were some really great books written. The Dr. Ann Salters, I don't know if you ever saw her book, interviewing, going around to prisons and talking to people. And one of the top responses that she and others got to who were the easiest children for you to molest, they all said, show me a naive kid and I'll show you a kid I can easily molest. So parents should understand that also, that you're really introducing risk to their health by sheltering them to the point that they don't understand basic education.
I want to jump in with you on that, Eric, because it's so important, and I feel, knowing you, I could say this more comfortably in your audience.
Go for it.
It's a very, very scary thing, because on one hand, some of the things we push the most in yeshivas, especially for girls, is we love two what we call personality traits: agreeableness and conscientiousness. The girl who sits quietly, does what she's supposed to do, takes notes, and a boy who sits and he stells zu, as they say, he's following the system, is beautiful. And there's a tremendous value to that. But Rabbi, what are the two most things that make you most vulnerable to abuse, not just of sexual abuse, to a boss who's going to take advantage of you, to an inappropriate husband, to a bully?
Yep.
Are those same things. And we're not doing a good enough job helping people be really assertive from the youngest ages, assertive not just about their body, to say, yes, I could follow and I'm going to learn and I'm going to be bakovidik, I'll speak appropriately, I won't speak with, but at the same time, I'm an individual and I have strength. And I think it's very important for all of this that we emphasize that. And it's not just preventing again of abuse. We're stuck having to play defense. We want our kids to grow up and to be leaders and to be people who are empowered and to have a voice and to be able to stand their ground. So I think, again, so much of our messaging, we have to move away from the cracks.
Right, right. And then just one more thing, and I would like you get to practical advice to parents, but what you said about having that you did the book, if they would teach it in school, I'd like to plug your book some more and say that the average teacher, the average Rebbe, the average Amora, doesn't have the experience of how to frame this and how to do it. So I think it's better that we have a book, even if every teacher would do it. I think the teachers would need training on how to do this. I think there's been so much damage. I'm sure you know as well as anyone how damaging it is when the kids get these horrible messages, how they're going to burn in hell forever if they violate kedusha areas or masturbate or even if they have an accidental wet dream. The damage that's done to them is just incredible, and they feel so down on themselves. It rarely leads to improved behavior. It just makes them feel more guilty.
So absolutely, it's not only what you're saying is absolutely true, but not only does it not lead to improved behavior, if I want to pick, and I highlight this in the second half of the book, the best way to create the greatest amount of sexual acting out and compulsivity is to make somebody feel toxic about themselves, because what are they going to do to self-soothe and escape? They're going to do more of it. And so that is where I spend the most time in the second half of the book. You're absolutely right. And just derech agav, Baruch Hashem, we have sponsors for free books from Mechanchim and Mechanchos. And Baruch Hashem, many yeshivas are starting to bring me in to train, even without their staff necessarily doing the teaching, because we really want parents to do this. We saw that if we give parents the skills, and we did this with abuse prevention, they thought, you're going to teach parents to talk to these kids about this? What are you, crazy? You people are nuts. And we said, if we do it right, we'll be matzliach. And Baruch Hashem, hundreds of thousands of families did it. And I believe that was one of the big push I had for the Gedolim, was to let's give them a chance. We can't say, oh, they're not going to be able to do it until we've done ours. And so we have it for educators, even who are not necessarily teaching their class, but to have the knowledge and awareness both on the teaching side and on how do you deal with the issues that come up. So that's crucial. And
it also gives the parents hopefully will position themselves as the first one the kids come to when they have a question. When they do, if they're more likely to speak to a parent than a faculty member in school if they have a challenge with one of these issues or have a question or follow-up, or they hear incorrect information from somebody else and said, you told me this, but someone else said that. So parents need desperately.
That's the biggest goal. That's the biggest goal. I want to empower parents, because every parent is dedicated to their child's life. You give over your whole life. You're working, you're tirelessly giving to your kids. And what do? When do our kids need us most after infancy? These areas are the hardest times. And what do? We stick our heads in the sand and say, I'll walk you down to the chuppah. And the most important thing I want to impart is you don't have to wait. If you get over a little bit of your own baggage and discomfort, you can walk your kid hand in hand. And like you said, not just for when they have a stroke. Why not be there? Why not preemptively be the person that you're their go-to for everything else? For child safety, you want to be their go-to. For chinuch, you want to be their go-to. For this, you want them to find on the street, and then I'll do damage control. be there. That's my biggest thing. Stand up, be there for your kids throughout the hardest parts of their life. So why should any child have to go about this type of issue alone? Just to develop, forget any abnormal, forget any exposure, just the whole challenge of all the body changes, all the physical changes, spiritual changes, without any knowledge, awareness, or supports from any adults around them. To me, it's an absolute crisis that has a very simple solution. One of the few things that has a simple solution. Step up and get in there and take it by the reins and proactively do it.
So how do you recommend parents like begin? You spoke about the younger ages when
Sure.
you said 9 to 12 would be the time to start talking to them about their bodies. So what do you recommend parents do?
So this is a sensitive topic, and we could discuss how open to be on air. Meaning, people say, "Oh, he talks about breaking taboos," and then he gets on and he uses euphemisms. There's a very big difference when I'm on a Zoom for
Absolutely.
mixed audience and talking about all different things. And there is an area of tznius here. We're not trying to go do away with tznius. So I'm not necessarily going to be so explicit on the Zoom. The book is very clear in a
They
very
can read your book. It's fine. Let them
right,
read your
right.
book.
So
No
just so
worries.
we understand, page 18 Baruch Hashem worked out. Chai in the book goes through 2 chapters on what marital intimacy is. Basically, you're explaining how parents connect and how they bring a child into the world. It's very scientific. It's no drama. Fakir, you're taking all the drama out of it, and you're putting in a little bit of a sense of the beauty that when 2 people love each other, and it's a mitzvah, so that you're trying to give the true Torah value of this, and you're explaining it in very simple terms, so that most kids who are, when you do it the right age, they're like, that's weird, or oh, gross. And that's perfectly normal, because we're trying to hit them in a way where it's premature, where it's just intellectual. They don't have these drives and feelings yet. But now my parents are the source of information. My parents are the source of truth. So now whatever I hear, whenever I hear, oh, I'm filtering it through what I know to be true. Nobody could sell me some, oh, do you really know what's going on here? And I have the sense that my parents already preempted this, so I'll go back. So that's even before body changes or anything. You're doing this, and you have to know your kid, your situation, how mature, immature people, parents are worried, my kid's going to run to yeshiva the next day and announce, do you know what my parents told? Again, are there some kids that you have to worry about that? Maybe, but for the most part, if you're mature and comfortable and you're saying, I'm giving you, like you said to the class, you guys are old enough and mature enough to do this, most kids can handle it as long as we're okay and we don't make a whole drama out of it. And you need to do whatever you need to do. Talk yourself in the mirror, talk to your spouse, talk to your friend, until you can do it in a way that's no drama, calm and comfortable. I tell patients that come in my thing, I'm going to talk to you about this the same way I would ask you, did you have Cheerios or cornflakes for breakfast? Total calm, factual information, so that you impart it to them with your values. One of the biggest things is the value system. So that's already before they're entering into the changes of their body for puberty. Then for puberty time, so roughly, depends, 10 to 13, wherever that is, you're always trying to do it before. If you see your kid's a very early bloomer, you got to go earlier, customize it. What is going to change in your body? Obviously, for boys and girls, that's different. But what are these hormones? How is your body changing facially? What are the differences between a boy and a man? And you ask them, and they say, oh, I don't know, he's bigger, he's taller. Oh, he has a beard, he has hair, his voice is deeper. Yeah, those are all parts of the body's change during puberty. They're driven by hormones. In males, it's called testosterone, right? And here's what else happens. And you explain how the testes, and you explain what those are, develop sperm, what the sperm does and what its function is, and how that connects back to bringing a child in the world. And here's what's going to change. Your attractions are going to change. Your thoughts are going to change. And the biggest piece there is to normalize that every single one of these changes that's occurring to you, both physically and emotionally and spiritually, is perfectly normal, healthy, and exactly how you're designed, so that eventually you'll be able to have a marriage and be a parent. And so what to expect on your body level, what to expect on the emotional level, and what to expect on the challenges. Now, as they're getting closer, so now we move up, let's say, to 10 to 13, when they're about to face actual challenges with fantasy, with, like you said, wet dreams or masturbation. So the boys need to know both, first of all, again, what's changing practically. They need to know the halachas and hashkafas, right? What can you do? What can't you do? and they need a prep and a framework for what happens when you struggle with that, and how are you going to deal with these drives to the sense that wanting to touch and be intimate and connect with somebody of the opposite gender is, again, 1000% normal and nothing wrong with you. And I love to use the Alter of Kelm's thing. Parents came to him, they said, our kid is meshuga because he dances with shiksus and he eats chazer. And the Alter Kelm said, and I'll keep it out of the Yiddish for the general audience, he said, no, your kid is perfectly normal, right? If he danced with the pigs and he ate the shiksus, that would be crazy. This sense has to be, you're perfectly normal and healthy. The girls also need a tremendous emphasis on, besides for the body changing, the body image, self-esteem, eating disorders, and a healthy dose of what tznius is. So often it's saying that, oh, cover up. And they don't have a sense, again, of the beauty. Yes, we tell them, you're a bas melech. You're a bas melech, you're a bas melech, you're a bas melech. And therefore, what do you do because you're this princess? There's 1,000 rules that we will point out to you that if you violate, we'll punish you for. Who wants to be a bas melech? Then do me a favor, sign me out of the palace ASAP. Like, get me out of here. So we need to be articulating a different version of tznius and kedusha that talks to them and uplifts them. And again, we want them to know that, yes, you're going to have this struggle with sexual drive. It's meant to be there. And one of the hardest pieces was to layer this into our general framework. Kids are going to ask, especially teens, Hashem loves me. Why does he give me all these challenges? Why does he give me all these things with no outlet? And instead of waiting for them to be pained and struggle with that, explain it to them, how it fits into our whole hashkafas HaChaim, why we have challenge, why we have struggle. And then to know that your job with this is not to bang your head in the wall the whole day. Fight, no look, don't see, don't see.
Exactly.
Go have a good life, enjoy your learning, enjoy your friends, have good outlets, and don't be busy with this. And if you fall, get up and move forward. That's best thing in terms of those components.
Dr. Shlomi, I did last week's topic of my parenting clips was getting your children. It's about really understanding your kids. And I talked about, I tied it into Rav Dessler's Nekudas HaBechira, to know where a person's, what you were speaking about, knowing your children, where they're tempted, where they exercise their Nekudas HaBechira, meaning some things that say in the Torah are way below on Nekudas HaBechira, like killing people, and above it is not saying a word of Lashon Hara for the whole year, or not getting through a tefillah, the davening, praying without even, one, like missing a word that you didn't have full concentration on. And most of us are in the middle, So I was talking about this concept, and what I was stressing to parents is, I think one of the nicest things, if you want to get your children, is know where their Nekudas HaBechira is, how insulting it is. If I got up to my students and I talked to them about not killing anyone, it's one of the 10 commandments, right? It's one of the Zeres HaDibros. I should be talking about it, but the kids say, "Well, are you kidding me? You think I'm a..." And if I told them to get up for Chatzos tonight, and mourn the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, that would also be an appropriate thing to say. But come on, Rebbe, don't. So it's insulting when people don't get you. So I said, try to get your kids Nekudas HaBechira. So I mentioned one of the most remarkable things I heard from a Rebbe about tznius, about modesty, and how, like, we wanted to get up and applaud. It was a high school Rebbe of ours, happened to have been a very Hasidic fellow, that we, initially I wouldn't have expected it from him. He probably did it for the shock value too. Right. But it was the first hot day, May or whatever it was, or June, and all of a sudden it hit 90 degrees, New York City, Right. So we were expecting the fire and brimstone talk, like he says, it's a hot day today. I'm going, oh, here we go. And he got up and he said, "Kick nicht das zweite Mal. Don't look a second time."
Right.
And he said, "Look, I'm not telling you to walk around the street with a paper bag over your head. It's ridiculous. Just don't look a second time." That was his, and like, as an adult, I'm looking back on it, it was like so brilliant, because we listened to it and we said, this man understands my Nekudas HaBechira. He understands that we're teenagers and we're walking in the street and whatever. And then he told us, he said, when you come back to yeshiva, stop in the Beis Medrash for 30 seconds and learn one Mishnah, one Pasuk of Chumash, just to get your head back, and get yourself back oriented towards a life of Kedusha, of holiness. And like, I think that's really what parents should strive for, to come up with a normal message, a healthy message. I often tell parents when they ask me about this issue, I say, think about talking to children about healthy eating habits. If you go to an extreme and tell them never, ever, no potato, not even a single potato chip for your whole life, they're going to roll their eyes and they're much more likely to develop eating disorders if you frame it like that. I thought the eating is sometimes less emotionally charged than this topic, but it's a way of helping parents, frame things in a way that's healthy.
So I think it's amazing. I want to circle back to your Nekudas HaBechira point, because so often, even what we're trying to do in therapy, in some way, if you framed it religiously, would be to identify people's Nekudas HaBechira and help expand it. But the first step is, one of the hardest things, and the adults really have to do this first, is can you identify your own, where you're really struggling, and can you accept that what's above your Nekudas HaBechira, which maybe it's that first look, maybe it's that you're addicted to porn and you're trying to take one step to join a meeting. Wherever it is, to say, whatever's above that, I'm not going to sit and beat myself over, because that's not my job today. My job is to identify where I'm at and then go from there. That doesn't mean everything is frivolous. That doesn't mean the opposite way. I don't have to do anything, right? But to the ability to say, this is where I am, and be okay where your Nekudas HaBechira is. And that means I can't look at other person and say, wow, they're so tznuah, or he's such a cut. That's not what God wants from you.
Me.
It's nothing to do with you.
That's brilliant. I never thought, thank you, Dr. Shlomi. I learned another thing from you now. That's really great. And in fact, Rav Dessler's point in this whole Nekudas HaBechira discussion, right. I use an analogy of a football field. He used war, a battle, right. But the idea is to move the ball forward, not to move 50 yards, in one play. So he said
to be okay with that.
Right, to be okay, exactly. It's exactly what you're saying. You go back and forth, but overall, over the course of your life, you should try to move that ball a little bit forward. And if you lost a couple of yards, try to make it back, but in a healthy way. That's brilliant. I love what you said.
And if we just spell out even what Rav Dessler himself says, which for people is controversial, but it's straight up in his piece. You don't even have to make any extensions. He gives the example of somebody who was raised by bandits.
Right.
And he says that his bechira is not whether to do a highway robbery or not. It's to maybe not kill the guard.
Right.
Say, come on. And that person has to be okay. You know what? Robbery today, it's not allowed. I'm not going to sanction it, but that's where my struggle is. My struggle is not to kill. Robbery, I got to go. Someday I'll do it. Someday I won't. What do you mean? Highway robbery? Really? Can you be okay that that's where your Nakuda is? And the hardest thing for people today is we do a lot of things that look perfect on the outside. We do it in our firm way. Social media does it in a different way, where everything looks good. And I look at the other person and say, oh, something's so wrong with me. And not just that, okay, you're not there yet. This is, again, crucial. Not just, for me, my Nekudas HaBechira is so low. If we looked at it the opposite way, what does Hashem want from you? When he woke you up today, which was no accident, and he put your Nekudas HaBechira, he could have gotten rid of your struggles with tznius, your struggles with watching your eyes, your struggles to not say lashon hara. He could have woken you up, and you would struggle with, Reb Chaim Kanievsky or his Rebbitzon's struggles. He could have made that. What does he want from you today? And can you appreciate that? Not only is I never, that might be as important as Reb Chaim Kanievsky learning Kol HaTorah. You deciding maybe today I won't look at porn. Maybe today I won't do that second look. Can you have not just be okay? Can you have chashivas for that.
That's
And
what I love it. I love it. You know, you go back to if you're using it as a football analogy, right? You're pinned back on your own 5 yard line. You have 95 yards to go for a touchdown. The coach would say, don't try to score. If you're a wide receiver, don't go out there 50 yards away because you
right.
need to get your play is not to get a touchdown. We got to get out of the zone right now. We got to move a little bit forward. That's brilliant, Dr.
And
Schlein. It's really
and just to
masterful
hammer
work.
it home because of the very difficult takufa that we're in right now, when the Israeli soldiers are going into the Hamas tunnels, how they go in, they say, oh gosh, I got drafted, I'm stuck, I might not make it out, I might be captured, and then you almost pray to die, right? How do they go in? They go in with energy and simcha and meaning and purpose because they know my whole job is to go into the darkest place on earth right now and to do what I have to do there. Each and every one of us, if we would see your purpose is not to be born 300 years ago when they were getting married at age 14 and not have Hashem could work out his world. Our job is to be in the tunnels, in our own tunnels, to deal with our own, where we're captive to our own dark side, and where Khalila, the world is trying to capture us with dark forces. And we have to go in with that spirit, with that simcha, with that singing, with that meaning and purpose to say, Hashem woke me up today in this dark place. What do you mean last night? You know how many Averis I did? You know how much looking? You know what? You know how many, terrible Averis with who knows what? And Hashem woke you up today and he says, you're back in the tunnel. So what's your mission? Oh, no. I'm supposed to be outside just in the base medrash. I'm supposed to be totally tsanua, just listening to inspiring shirim. No. You woke up in the tunnel. So that's where you're supposed to be. And you're supposed to do that with a tremendous sense of pride and energy and thankfulness that this is where it is. And then when you do that, that's the greatest light you bring to the world. When you go into the darkest places and we go into the lowest, and we know as we're getting close to Mashiach time that we're going to go darker and darker and darker. And yes, we're facing unprecedented issues with Kedusha, not because, tragedy, bemoan the old days. Yes, there was a certain beauty in the old days, but Hashem wants us here. So we need to have that attitude and to impart that to our children.
That's great. That's really great. You know, I've also found that vulnerability, when parents are vulnerable and discuss their vulnerabilities, it's so endearing. It makes we feel almost a natural connection with people who express their vulnerabilities. So I think I of course I wouldn't encourage anyone any parent to go through any gory details, and discuss what you're struggling with exactly. But I do think it's healthy to tell your children, listen, I'm 64 years old and I still struggle with this, to present it that way. I went to Dr. Abraham Twersky. I was very fortunate. He spent so many hundreds of hours mentoring me when I first started in this place and didn't know anything about anything. And I once told him I wanted to get into writing. Does he have any recommendations for me? And in his, he had a beautiful way of patting on the head. It's great. I really miss him. He said, Rav Yaakov, get used to rejection. You ever heard it from him? You ever heard the line? He said, Rav Yaakov, get used to rejection. He said, my first manuscript was rejected by 37 publishers. That's what he told me. He said 30, and you see this incredibly accomplished person he had authored at the time, probably 60, 70 books already. He did 80 or more than 80 in his lifetime. You don't have this picture of him getting these stamped, and it's his vulnerability that first of all, it empowered me to get used to the notion of rejection, but it's incredibly important. I really encourage parents to share your vulnerabilities. Again, you don't need to go through details. This is a struggle you'll have all your life. Everybody goes through this in different ways. And I think positive messaging around it is also, I'll tell you, Doctor, feel free the some part. One of our sons called me one night. I asked him permission to share the story. He called me one night. I'm dating myself, obviously, from the story. And he called me up and he said, Tati, he said, Giuliani was unfaithful to his wife. It was front, he used the yeshivish words for it. He used the
Right.
yeshivish term for it. He was a teenager. It was during night say, the night, the night study part of the day. Um, and I asked him, I didn't know what he wanted. Like he called me at on my cell phone from a payphone in yeshiva, and he said, remember payphones? He said, Giuliani, like, so I said, I'm like, what? So he says, Clinton is Clinton, but Giuliani, then he was
He
he
was
was rational and normal,
right.
he so he like the earth moved under him. It was a fascinating, just as a young parent raising a teenage kid. So I told him, I said, Shefala, sweetheart, I don't think you're getting much learning done tonight, are you? So I said, Whatever." So I said, I'll pick you up in 5 minutes." So I took him out for an ice cream, and I was thinking on the way there, what's my message? Like, what do I want to tell him? So he doesn't do the Torah, so that's why he did it. I mean, come on, right? What am I going to answer when a person who does Torah is unfaithful or other things like that? And I don't think it's you could say somewhere in the conversation. I was thinking the whole time on the way there, like, what do I want him to walk away from? So afterwards, we went for a walk, and I told him, I said, you ever notice what the door in my study at home is made out of? He says, yeah, it's glass completely. So you ever wonder why we did that? So he said, I thought mommy liked it and you had no choice. That's what he told me. He said, I thought mommy liked it, so you just rolled over, Dad. So I said, no, mommy and I talked about it because I deal with people. This was 30 years ago. People weren't that sensitive to it. And I told him, did you ever in all your life, people come over to the house all the time. Did you ever see a woman come by herself? Ever? Did you ever see me alone with a woman all the years? So I said, Mommy and I talked about it because I love the Torah. I love your mother. I respect my boundaries as a Jew and my commitment to my wife. We felt that we should do more than the average boundaries because of the stuff position that I'm in. And you know what the message is? That anybody could slip, and you have to put the boundaries in place before something happens, before you're emotionally off. Because the smartest person and the most popular person and everything else can get messed up. And I said, you'll be married one day. That's what I told him then. I said, I know it's hard for you to imagine. You'll be married one day, and you'll and even before then, even now, put some boundaries in your own lives when things are rational. And it went over so well. It went over so well with him. So that what I meant about vulnerability is not only to say you're vulnerable, to explain that I am vulnerable also, like every other human being. And here's what I did about it to put some mechanisms in place and boundaries that to prevent people from doing what everybody in the world does. You get caught up in the moment, and then by then it's too late.
I think it's absolutely crucial because, like you said before, when the kids feel that while they're way on high, they feel disconnected. I started a thing many years ago when I'm asked to speak in places. So sometimes I'll call, like in a high school, I'll get permission from parents and I'll call a few of the kids in that school. And within 5 minutes, especially I tell them it's anonymous, I'm a psychologist, tell me the real deal. They'll tell me in 5 minutes exactly which teacher's got it, which teacher doesn't, what's happening. It's an amazing thing. Many years ago, I was going to speak in a girls' school, and I had people who I knew, and they would trust me, and then I could speak with their children in an appropriate fashion. And the girls, that was one of the biggest messages, is that our teachers don't get us. They talk about sneeze the whole day. They don't understand. They don't make it sound like when they're wearing their black cardigan and their Rockport shoes, that why on earth are you struggling with sneeze? It doesn't help us. It just makes us feel totally disconnected. And it's the same thing. There's a beauty in some of our books that paint Gedolim and Rebbitzins as just saintly people. But if we're honest, one of the ones that inspire us the most is when they struggled and when they fell and they got themselves back up. And again, to me, this is one of the things where we did something very strange to the Torah. Our Torah is totally different than almost any other history book. History
There's all
whitewashes things.
there's all the stuff there, right?
Every
The
single
challenges,
person who's in the Torah, it's written about their failures. The
right?
4 people who never sinned are only brought down later in the brief Gemara
Right.
somewhere. The Torah brings and takes to task, and we're including sexual failings. For goodness sakes, one of the reasons we're called Yehudim is because Yehuda said, he admitted when he did this inappropriate thing with Tamar, and instead of saying, well, that's what we're going to be called Jews, that's what you want to name us after? Yeah, because the ability to say, you know what, I have drive and I struggle and I make mistakes and I pick up, that's actually what defines us. The more we do that in a real way,
Right. I
in a healthy way, in a boundary way, like you said, we don't go through all the details, not because the details are bad, because again, there's a boundary then, and there's you want to be appropriate.
Right.
But this idea that the Torah is for humans, and they're for humans in 2024 who are struggling with 2024 issues, and like you said with your kid, which is so beautiful, when you're older, you can watch that. That's not Torah.
Right.
No,
Right.
you'll understand when you're later. That's not Torah.
Right.
I struggle.
I often say, what do we know about the last 17 years of Yaakov's life? Virtually nothing.
Right.
I'm sorry?
Almost nothing, exactly, right?
Virtually nothing. I think they were the happiest years of his life. He was in reverse kollel. He was being supported by his son, right? All his children were around. He didn't have to deal with Esav. He didn't have to deal with Lavan. He didn't have to deal with Yosef's sale any longer. And he was just there with his grandchildren in peace and tranquility. So I'd like to suggest, it's my own take on it, but I didn't see it anywhere. But I think that the Torah, specifically, just like you said, the Torah is a blueprint for how to deal with struggles, how to deal with children who aren't doing what the parents want them to do. Right? The Torah writes about that in painful detail, right? About dealing. I love to golf. You know, there was I was at a hotel in Florida, and they had the golf clinic there. They had a big sign from Lee Trevino. He's a big golfer before your times. So he said that I never learned anything from a tournament that I won. He said, I never learned any, it's a great line. I never learned anything from a tournament that I won. And that the Torah is telling us that Yaakov had a beautiful life during that time, but we're talking about struggles because struggles are important. And any final thoughts, Doctor? We got to do this again sometime.
Sure, but I'd be remiss in not talking with Rabbi Yaakov Horowitz about the health and safety component. So we talked about abuse prevention.
Please.
And we, Baruch Hashem, with your help and others, we do a pretty good job at the younger ages, right? But when did the real challenges hit? Again, we talked about exposure and that 9 to 11, and then when the hormones actually hit is when we have a tremendous acting out, and we made tremendous inroads in terms of what we call institutional abuse in camps and yeshivas and shuls. We have cameras and we have education, we have policies. The place that we are struggling mightily is still with incest. And our biggest category of that is children. So under 18, abusing either a sibling or a cousin, and it's often sadly a male, but it can be the other way. And again, these kids are not sexual offenders and we should eradicate them. These are hormonal, curious, uneducated children. And we need to do a crucial job is continuing our health and safety messages now, especially when they're connecting it to, now you have thoughts, now you have feelings, now you have drives, now you have curiosity. How are you going to do that? One of the hardest paragraphs to write in the book was, how do I, in a healthy way, help a child differentiate, the averus and the issues that you do? Let's say you watch something or you masturbate, that's between you and God. Right. When you involve somebody else, that's a whole different game. That's a whole different issue. And so I really try to put that there for them to realize that's a different level, and we need to articulate this and connect the dots and be much more aware and mindful of that. So that's an absolute crucial element that needs to be done.
Right, and I absolutely, and I tell parents always to be this situational awareness about even the placing of the bedrooms where the people are sleeping. When I was fortunate, I spoke at a Chabad the Shluchim conference. You know, they have 5,000
Yeah.
Chabad rabbis all around the world. So I spoke there 4 years running, about 10, 12 years ago. And I begged them to set up their homes. And I tell parents, generally speaking, that our children did it with their homes, you know, when they did renovation. We didn't do it in ours, but to have a separate entrance from the outside and then a locked door, and your guests stay outside your house and they walk around through the front. If you can, you know, because especially I spoke to the Chabad Shluchim. The first year I got like shocked looks, and then many of them came up to me and thanked me. And in subsequent years, and since then, I still have people coming and thanking me for getting them to reconfigure their homes that way. So parents should think about that. You have his son over, he brings a friend of his over, you got a teenage girl or a pre-teenage girl. Really be mindful about it. Really.
The more educated and empowered the children are and the parents are,
Yep.
the healthier the home. And this keeps everybody, and it's not, we don't want to create this anxiety state. Oh my gosh, who's offending? We want to create a natural set of universal precautions and boundaries so that that facilitates ease and health. Not, oh, everybody's lurking around.
Exactly.
The best way you actually can create good family bonding is with healthy boundaries and awareness and education.
Right. Doctor, thank you so very much. I wish you mazel and bracha, success on your book. I wouldn't say I'm your biggest fan, but I'm one of your top fans of the book. It's such an incredible contribution from Boys to Men. I really encourage every single parent to get a copy. And keep up your amazing work. I look forward to doing another one.
You
with
too.
you.
Thank you so much for having me, and it's a tremendous pleasure and privilege to be able to work together and collaborate.
Thank
Yashika.
you so much. Be matzliach. Good luck. Bye-bye.